Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're uncovering a question written quietly on your own skin. How did humans become white? Not through myth, not through mystery, but through sunlight, migration, survival, and thousands of years of climate adaptation. In this deep sleep history journey, we'll travel back to ancient Africa under a blazing equatorial sun, follow early humans as they stepped north into mist and winter, witness the silent vitamin D crisis that reshaped pigmentation, explore genetic mutations like SLC24A5 that slowly transformed skin tone, and discover how the agricultural revolution accelerated changes in ways no one expected. This is the story of human skin evolution, of melanin as shield and doorway, of out-of-Africa migration and modern global history intertwining. It's not about race, it's about latitude, it's about biology, it's about the sun writing its signature across generations. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes. Let your breathing slow. Imagine the sun rising over ancient Africa. Imagine your ancestors standing beneath it, and let this guided sleep story carry you gently through the science, the migration, and the quiet truth that beneath every shade of skin, we are one human story drifting together into night. So look at your hand for a moment. Not quickly, not casually, but as if you were seeing it for the very first time. Turn it slowly toward the light. Notice the back of your hand, slightly darker, familiar with the sun. Now turn it over. The palm is softer, paler, more sheltered. Why? Why does the same body carry two different shades? This is where our sleep story begins. Tonight, in this quiet journey of human skin evolution, we are not chasing drama or conflict. We are simply listening to the whisper written in your skin. Every tone, every shade, every subtle difference is a memory. Not your memory alone, but the memory of tens of thousands of years. In the world of history for sleep, we slow down enough to notice what we usually overlook. Skin is not merely a surface. It is not just color. It is a living archive. Long before cities, before agriculture, before written language, your ancestors stood beneath an African sun so bright it shaped their very biology. All humans began there. All humans were dark. Not as a label, not as a category, but as protection. The sun, generous yet relentless, pours ultraviolet light onto the earth. That light can nurture life, but it can also damage it. Darker skin, rich in melanin, was a shield. It guarded precious folate in the bloodstream, a vitamin essential for reproduction and survival. Without that protection, life would have struggled to continue. So the earliest chapters of human skin evolution were written in deep brown and black tones, not by preference, not by culture, but by necessity. And yet, as you rest now in the quiet of your room, perhaps far from equatorial sunlight, your skin tells a slightly different story. Because history did not remain still, humans moved. Slowly at first, then steadily. Small groups began to leave their sunlit homeland. They walked along coastlines, crossed deserts, followed rivers, and with each step northward, the sunlight softened. The ultraviolet intensity weakened. The shield that once protected began to change its role. In lower sunlight, Too much melanin could limit the body's ability to produce vitamin D, another vital element for strong bones and immune health. And so, over thousands upon thousands of years, subtle mutations appeared. Not dramatic transformations, not overnight changes, but gentle shifts like the fading of twilight. Lighter skin emerged in some populations because it allowed more efficient vitamin D production in regions with weaker sun. This is not a story of superiority. It is not a story of division. It is a story of adaptation. In this sleep story history, we let go of modern noise and return to something simpler: survival under the sky. Your skin color is not random. It is a response. It is evidence. It is biology shaped by geography. Imagine those early migrants standing beneath unfamiliar northern skies, feeling colder winds, seeing longer winters. Their children, generation after generation, carried slight variations. Nature selected quietly, not with intention, not with judgment, only with balance. Too much sun required protection. Too little sun required absorption. Between these forces, human skin evolved. And here, in this gentle pause before sleep, notice how personal this vast history becomes. The color of your own hand is not merely yours. It is a solution found by your ancestors. It is a quiet agreement between sunlight and survival. The mystery written in skin is not about white or dark alone. It is about movement, about migration, about the delicate dance between earth and biology. As you breathe slowly now, let the awareness settle softly. Your body carries history without speaking, and tonight we are simply listening. As you continue resting there, perhaps with your hand still gently open, notice how strange it is that something so visible can remain so misunderstood. We see skin every day. We describe it casually, yet we rarely pause to ask what it truly represents. In this quiet continuation of our sleep story history, let us go deeper into human skin evolution, not as a debate, not as a headline, but as a slow unfolding across time. Change did not arrive like a storm. It did not sweep across continents in a single dramatic wave. Instead, it moved like the tide, advancing and retreating in rhythms too gradual for any one person to notice. Imagine a child born in a northern valley thousands of years ago. That child's skin may have been only slightly lighter than their parents, not white as we define it today, not sharply different, just a subtle shift, a tiny adjustment in melanin production, shaped by genes responding to weaker sunlight. That difference, almost invisible in one generation, could become more noticeable over hundreds, then thousands of years. Evolution is patient. It does not rush to satisfy identity. It does not care about categories. It only balances need and environment. Under equatorial skies, darker skin preserved folate and protected against intense ultraviolet radiation. Under northern skies, lighter skin allowed the body to synthesize enough vitamin D despite long winters and shorter days. Neither is better, neither is worse. Each is a biological answer to a different question asked by the sun. And here lies the gentle viral curiosity of our story tonight. The color of your skin is not a statement about who you are. It is a record of where your ancestors stood. It tells us about latitude, about seasons, about clouds and coastlines. It whispers of migrations that stretched across tens of thousands of years. Some groups traveled into Europe, others moved into Central Asia, East Asia, and beyond. Interestingly, lighter skin evolved through different genetic pathways in different regions. In Europe, certain mutations in genes like SLC24A5 and SLC45A2 became common. In East Asia, other genetic changes contributed to lighter pigmentation. Separate roots, similar outcomes. This is one of the most beautiful truths in human skin evolution. Similar environmental pressures can shape similar adaptations in entirely different populations. Convergent evolution, quiet and elegant. And still, beneath all these variations, the human genome remains astonishingly unified. The differences in skin tone represent a tiny fraction of our DNA. More than 99.9% of our genetic code is shared across humanity. When you consider that, the contrast between shades feels less like division and more like a spectrum painted by sunlight. As you breathe slowly, let this realization soften any rigid ideas. The story of how humans became white is not a story of becoming something new. It is a story of adjusting to new light. It is about leaving one sky and learning to live under another. It is about survival without losing connection. And if you look again at your hand, you may see not just color, but continuity. The same evolutionary forces that shaped lighter skin in the north still operate today, though modern life has changed our exposure to sunlight dramatically. Migration continues. People move across continents faster now than ever before. And our bodies, though ancient in design, still respond to the same fundamental biology of vitamin D, ultraviolet radiation, and melanin. The modern world brings us together in ways our ancestors could never imagine, yet our skin quietly carries the echoes of their journeys. In this history for sleep, we allow complexity to dissolve into calm understanding. There is no hierarchy written in skin. There is only adaptation. There is only geography turned into biology. The mystery written in skin becomes less mysterious when we slow down. It becomes a gentle reminder that all humans began in the same place, under the same sun. Lighter skin did not erase darker origins, it emerged from them. Just as branches extend from a single tree, human diversity grows from shared roots. And so, as your eyes grow heavier, let this final thought settle like dusk. Your skin is a living map, drawn by sunlight and time, connecting you to Africa, to migration, to survival, and to every other human resting somewhere on this planet tonight. The story is not about separation, it is about shared adaptation. And as you drift toward sleep, remember that beneath every shade, the same ancient heartbeat continues, steady and unbroken. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the African sun 200,000 years ago. There is no sunscreen, no woven shelter, no glass, no shade, no cities to hide beneath. Only open sky stretching endlessly above the savanna, and a burning sphere pouring down light without hesitation. Feel that heat in your imagination, not as pain, but as presence. It presses gently yet persistently against bare skin. This is where the story of early humans in Africa truly begins. In our ongoing sleep story history, we return not to monuments or empires, but to something more ancient and more intimate, the human body under sunlight. The earliest members of our species, Homo sapiens, evolved in equatorial regions where ultraviolet radiation was intense year-round. The light was not seasonal, it was constant, and under that relentless brightness, biology responded. Dark skin evolution was not an accident, it was not aesthetic, it was survival, shaped by radiation. Melanin, the pigment that gives skin its color, became a natural shield, a quiet guardian woven into every layer of the epidermis. Protection, shelter, preservation. Those three rhythms echo softly across millennia. Melanin absorbed and dispersed ultraviolet rays, reducing damage to DNA. It protected, it sheltered, it preserved. And most importantly, it guarded folate, also known as vitamin B9, a molecule essential for cell division and reproduction. Without adequate folate, pregnancies could fail, and offspring could suffer developmental issues. In the harsh brightness of equatorial Africa, unprotected skin would have allowed ultraviolet radiation to break down folate circulating in the bloodstream. Over generations, individuals with more melanin were more likely to survive and reproduce successfully. Nature did not choose consciously, it balanced quietly. Protection, shelter, preservation. Dark skin was a biological agreement between humanity and the sun. Imagine those early humans walking across grasslands, their bodies lean, their eyes alert, their skin rich with melanin that shimmered slightly under the sun's glare. They hunted, gathered, formed bonds, raised children. Their skin was not just covering, it was adaptation in motion. In this chapter of human skin evolution, darkness was strength, darkness was resilience, darkness was continuity. And yet, we must speak of it gently, because when we say that all humans were once dark, we are not speaking politically, we are speaking genetically, we are speaking historically. The fossil and genetic record tells us that modern humans emerged in Africa roughly 200 to 300,000 years ago. The genes associated with lighter skin appeared much later, after migrations into regions with lower ultraviolet exposure. So the original human palate was deep and protective. It allowed early humans in Africa to stand unshielded beneath the brightest sun on Earth. Feel again the imagined heat on your skin as you rest. The air shimmers, the horizon wavers. There is no artificial barrier between body and sky. And yet the body is not helpless. It carries its own solution. Melanin absorbs light, converts it into harmless heat, and prevents ultraviolet rays from penetrating too deeply. Protection, shelter, preservation. Even today, this same biological mechanism continues quietly within you. If you spend time in sunlight, your skin may darken slightly. That is melanin increasing in response, an ancient reflex echoing from our African origins. In this gentle retelling of early humans in Africa, we see that dark skin evolution was not a division among people, it was a shared inheritance. Every lineage traces back to this protective beginning. The differences that emerged later were branches from a common trunk. But here, at the beginning, the trunk was strong and dark, anchored beneath equatorial skies. Let this awareness settle slowly as your breathing softens. Before there were borders, before there were categories, there was sunlight and adaptation. There was the body learning how to endure, and melanin quietly and faithfully protected, sheltered, preserved. As the imagined African sun continues to blaze above that ancient landscape, let us linger there a little longer, not in discomfort, but in understanding. The light is bright enough to make the air shimmer. It reflects off stone, off sand, off skin. For early humans in Africa, this was not a temporary season. It was life itself. The ultraviolet radiation reaching equatorial regions was among the strongest on Earth, day after day, generation after generation. And within that relentless brilliance, the story of dark skin evolution deepened its roots. Melanin did more than tint the surface of the body. It acted as a dynamic filter, absorbing harmful ultraviolet rays before they could penetrate too deeply into living tissue. Think of it not as a wall, but as a living canopy, adjusting, responding, quietly active. Protection, shelter, preservation. Beneath the skin, folate circulated through the bloodstream, essential for DNA synthesis, cell division, and especially for the development of healthy embryos. Without sufficient folate, the risk of neural tube defects and reproductive complications increases. In regions with intense ultraviolet exposure, folate molecules can be broken down by radiation. Over thousands of years, individuals whose skin contained higher concentrations of melanin were more likely to maintain adequate folate levels. They were more likely to bear healthy children, more likely to see those children grow. Evolution, slow and unhurried, favored that natural shield. This was not a conscious decision, it was the quiet arithmetic of survival. Early humans in Africa did not know the word vitamin. They did not speak of ultraviolet radiation or DNA, and yet their bodies understood in ways science would only describe much later. The rhythm of adaptation was built into their cells. When sunlight struck their skin, melanin absorbed and dissipated energy as harmless heat. The shield held firm: protection, shelter, preservation. This is why when we trace human skin evolution back to its beginning, we do not find a patchwork of colors scattered randomly across the continent. We find a deep, rich uniformity shaped by the same environmental force. The equatorial sun did not negotiate, it demanded resilience, and the human body answered with pigment. Feel for a moment the steady continuity of that answer. Imagine generations standing beneath the same sky, their children playing in dust and grass, their elders watching from shaded trees. The skin that covered them was not decoration, it was function. It allowed them to remain in the open without catastrophic loss of folate. It reduced the likelihood of severe sunburn and long-term cellular damage. It balanced exposure with endurance. In our modern world, where shade is optional and sunscreen comes in bottles, it is easy to forget how direct the relationship once was between sunlight and survival. But in the ancient African homeland, that relationship was immediate and uncompromising. This is the deep emotional truth behind dark skin evolution. It was love made biological. It was nature ensuring continuity. Every layer of melanin represented countless successful births, countless mornings where life continued rather than ended. When we speak gently of how humans became white in later chapters of history, we must first honor this beginning. All of humanity shares this origin beneath equatorial light. Before migration, before colder climates, before vitamin D deficiency became a new pressure in northern latitudes, there was only the sun and the shield: protection, shelter, preservation. Even today, the human body retains this ancient responsiveness. When exposed to strong sunlight, skin darkens slightly. It produces more melanin, a subtle echo of Africa within every lineage. The differences we see across the globe today are layered atop this original adaptation, not separate from it. And so, as you lie quietly now, let the image of that early African horizon soften into calm. Let the brightness fade into dusk. Know that the darkness of early human skin was not absence, it was abundance. It was strength woven into biology. It was the first answer humanity gave to the sun. And in that answer, the foundation of our shared story was laid, steady and enduring, beneath the oldest light we have ever known.
Step by step, step by step, they walked north, away from the equator, away from the familiar heat, away from the blazing vertical sun that had shaped their bodies for countless generations, into lands of mist, of shifting winds, of winters that lingered longer than memory had prepared them for. In this quiet continuation of our sleep story history,
we move gently into one of the most important chapters of human migration history, often called the Out of Africa theory. Around 60 to 80,000 years ago, small groups of humans began to leave the African homeland. Not all at once, not as an army, not as a dramatic exodus, but in scattered bands, following coastlines, tracking animals, searching for water, for opportunity, for space. Their steps were patient, their pace was slow. This was not a journey measured in miles per day, it was measured in generations. Children were born along the way, elders were buried along the way. The migration was not a straight line on a map, it was a breathing, pausing, adapting process stretching across thousands of years. As they moved northward and eastward, something subtle but profound began to change. The light itself shifted. Near the equator, sunlight falls almost directly overhead. Ultraviolet radiation strikes the skin with intensity, day after day, season after season. But as latitude increases, the angle of the sun changes. The light becomes slanted. It travels through more atmosphere before reaching the Earth. It weakens. It softens. Imagine standing beneath that new sky for the first time. The air is cooler. The seasons are more pronounced. Days grow shorter in winter. The sun hangs lower, casting longer shadows. For early humans, Africa had been a world of abundant ultraviolet light. Now, in these new territories, light was no longer excessive, it was limited. In this epic yet gentle journey, the pressure of the environment reversed itself. Where once the challenge was too much sun, now it became too little. In equatorial regions, dark skin evolution had been a shield against radiation and a protector of folate. But in higher latitudes, reduced ultraviolet exposure meant the body struggled to produce sufficient vitamin D. Vitamin D is synthesized in the skin when ultraviolet B rays penetrate and trigger chemical reactions. Without enough UVB, this process slows. Bones can weaken. Immune systems can falter. Over many generations, subtle genetic variations that reduced melanin production became advantageous in these lower light environments. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, like the slow turning of seasons. Human skin evolution did not abandon its past, it responded to new conditions. Imagine a child born along a northern coastline, perhaps with slightly less melanin than their grandparents. That difference might allow just a bit more ultraviolet light to penetrate the skin, enabling slightly better vitamin D synthesis in a region of long winters and pale skies. That small advantage, repeated across generations, becomes visible over millennia. This is the heart of the Great Migration in human migration history. It was not just movement across land, it was movement across light, across angles of the sun, across intensities of radiation. The Out of Africa theory is not only about geography, it is about the transformation of environmental pressures. As our ancestors traveled through the Middle East, into Europe, into Central and South Asia, they carried with them the same genetic foundation shaped in Africa, but the sunlight they encountered was different, softer, weaker, more seasonal. The shield that once protected now had to adjust. This was not a rejection of darkness, it was an adaptation to dimness. Step by step, they walked into new skies, and with every shift in latitude, the dialogue between skin and sun continued, steady and unhurried, written quietly into DNA.
And so they continued, step by step,
into lands where the sun no longer ruled the sky with the same authority. Imagine the first long winter they encountered, the air thinner with cold, the horizon silvered with frost, the sun rising late and setting early, its arc shallow, its warmth hesitant. In this next breath of our human migration history, the story softens into something quieter, almost introspective. The out of Africa theory tells us that once small bands of humans crossed into the Levant and beyond, they entered environments profoundly different from the African savanna. Forests replaced open plains, mountains interrupted horizons, clouds lingered longer, and most importantly, ultraviolet light diminished. The shift was not dramatic in a single lifetime. No one woke up one morning and felt evolution happening. But generation after generation, the difference accumulated. Under equatorial skies, too much ultraviolet radiation threatened folate levels. In these higher latitudes, too little ultraviolet radiation threatened vitamin D synthesis. The balance had inverted. The shield that once had to be strong now had to become permeable, not abandoned, but adjusted. Think of the body as listening carefully to its environment. In northern regions, particularly during long winters, the sun's rays strike at an oblique angle. Ultraviolet B radiation must pass through more atmosphere, losing intensity before reaching human skin. With reduced UVB exposure, darker skin, so protective in Africa, can limit the skin's ability to synthesize adequate vitamin D. Over thousands of years, small genetic variations that slightly reduced melanin production became advantageous. These changes did not erase the African origin, they layered upon it. This is a subtle but powerful truth in human skin evolution. Adaptation does not deny ancestry, it builds upon it. Imagine a coastal settlement somewhere in what we now call Southern Europe, perhaps 40,000 years ago. The sea is gray, the sky is overcast. The winter stretches longer than anyone remembers from the homeland. Children with marginally lighter skin may have produced slightly more vitamin D in these dimmer conditions. Their bones grew stronger, their immune systems steadier. The advantage was small, almost invisible, but persistent, and evolution favors persistence. In Central Asia, in the steppes and valleys, similar pressures emerged. In East Asia, where latitude and climate varied, different genetic pathways led to lighter pigmentation, convergent adaptation shaped by weaker sunlight. Human migration history is not merely a story of footprints across continents. It is a story of bodies learning new rhythms of light, from too much sun to not enough sun, from vertical brilliance to angled glow. This shift did not happen in isolation. Diet also played a role. In coastal regions rich in fish, which contain vitamin D, the pressure to lighten skin may have been reduced. In inland regions dependent on plant-based diets low in vitamin D, the pressure increased. Environment and nutrition intertwined. Slowly, gradually, the spectrum of human skin tones broadened. But even as lighter shades emerged in parts of Europe and Asia, the genetic distance between populations remained small. More than 99.9% of DNA continued to be shared. The visible differences in pigmentation represented a tiny fraction of our biological code, and yet they told a vast story about geography, climate, and adaptation. As you lie quietly now, let the imagery of this migration soften. See small groups crossing narrow land bridges, following rivers, pausing beneath unfamiliar stars. Feel the light changing, growing dimmer, gentler. Notice how the human body, without complaint, without awareness, adjusted across generations. This is not a tale of separation, it is a tale of continuity in motion. The Great Migration did not break humanity into fragments. It spread a single lineage across diverse skies. And in that spreading, the dialogue between sun and skin continued. Softer light, longer shadows, cooler air. A shield becoming thinner, not out of weakness, but out of necessity. Step by step, they walked into a world of reduced sunlight. And in that quiet shift from abundance to scarcity of ultraviolet light, the conditions were set for lighter skin to emerge in certain regions, not as destiny, not as identity, but as biology responding to latitude. As you breathe slowly, let this understanding settle like twilight over a northern plain. The story of how humans became white is not a sudden transformation. It is a gradual adjustment to weaker light. It is the continuation of the same evolutionary conversation that began under the African sun. And beneath every shade that emerged along the way, the same ancient origin remained, steady and unbroken, carried forward with every migrating step.
But the protective shield now began to feel like a wall. The same dark skin that had once guarded early humans beneath the African sun, preserving life with quiet devotion, now stood between the body and the faint northern light it desperately needed. In this gentle turning point of our history for sleep, we arrive at what scientists sometimes describe in human biology history as a silent crisis. Not a war, not a famine, not a visible catastrophe, but something subtler, unfolding inside bones, inside blood, inside growing children. This is the story of vitamin D evolution, a quiet biological negotiation between skin and sunlight. Under equatorial skies, ultraviolet radiation was abundant. Melanin absorbed the excess, shielding folate and protecting DNA. But in higher latitudes, especially during long winters, ultraviolet B radiation became scarce. The sun's angle was lower, its rays filtered through thicker atmosphere, its warmth diluted. For much of the year, the skin received only a fraction of the UVB it once did. And here lies the paradox. Melanin, so perfect as a shield in Africa, also blocks ultraviolet B rays. In regions with intense sunlight, this was life-saving. In regions with weak sunlight, it became limiting. Vitamin D is not obtained solely from food. In early human communities without fortified diets, the primary source was the skin itself. When ultraviolet B radiation strikes the skin, it converts a cholesterol derivative into vitamin D3, which is then processed by the liver and kidneys into its active form. This active vitamin D helps regulate calcium and phosphorus, essential minerals for building and maintaining strong bones. Without adequate vitamin D, bones soften. In children, this can lead to rickets, where legs may bend and growth becomes impaired. In adults, bone density decreases, increasing the risk of fractures. In dim northern environments, heavily pigmented skin reduced the efficiency of this process. Not dramatically in one winter, not catastrophically in a single year, but gradually across lifetimes. Imagine a small settlement somewhere in Ice Age Europe. The sky is often gray, snow reflects pale light but offers little ultraviolet energy. Food is seasonal. Fish rich in vitamin D may not always be available inland. Children with slightly lighter skin may produce slightly more vitamin D during brief summer months. Their bones may grow just a little stronger. Their immune systems may function just a bit better. The advantage is small, but evolution accumulates small advantages. In this silent crisis, natural selection did not punish darkness. It simply responded to scarcity. The body needed to open the door to light, even if that light was weak. Genetic variations that reduced melanin production allowed more ultraviolet B to penetrate the skin. The shield became thinner, not out of failure, but out of necessity. Vitamin D evolution was not about aesthetics, it was about skeletal survival. It was about ensuring that children could stand, walk, and carry life forward. And so, in parts of Europe and Asia, lighter skin tones gradually became more common over thousands of years.
This did not erase the African origin, it modified the protective balance. The crisis was silent because it unfolded slowly. There was no single generation that recognized it as a turning point. It was a whisper in the bones, a quiet message from the environment: adapt or struggle. And the human body, faithful to its long history of adaptation, listened. As you lie quietly now, feel the depth of this paradox. What once saved early humans in Africa could, under different skies, limit survival. Biology is not fixed, it is responsive. The same melanin that protected folate had to yield slightly to allow vitamin D production. In this chapter of human skin evolution, the conversation between sun and skin reached a new balance. The shield opened just enough to let the rare northern sunlight pass through. Not fully, not abruptly, but gently, gradually across centuries. And beneath that slow adjustment, the ancient story of migration continued, steady and patient, written not in headlines, but in bone and blood.
And so the crisis remained invisible, carried quietly within growing bodies beneath gray northern skies. No one spoke of vitamin D. No one understood ultraviolet B radiation. Yet the consequences were felt in subtle ways. Children who tired easily, bones that bent slightly under weight, winters that seemed longer not only in darkness but in strength. In this continuation of our human biology history, we slow down enough to notice how adaptation often begins as discomfort. Imagine a small community living near the edge of a frozen river. The sun rises low, never climbing high above the horizon. Even at midday, shadows stretch long and pale. The light that once flooded African plains now arrives filtered, weakened, hesitant. For months, ultraviolet B radiation is nearly absent. The body waits. It needs sunlight to produce vitamin D, yet the shield of melanin still stands firm, built for a different sky. Here is the paradox that shaped vitamin D evolution. What once preserved life by blocking radiation now limited the body's access to a nutrient essential for survival in colder climates. The human organism does not change instantly. It responds through variation. In every generation, small genetic differences exist naturally. Some individuals produce slightly less melanin. Their skin allows a bit more ultraviolet B to pass through during rare sunny days. That small difference can mean slightly higher vitamin D levels, slightly stronger bones, slightly improved resilience against infection. Evolution does not require dramatic advantage. It favors consistent advantage. Over thousands of years, these marginal differences accumulate. In regions of persistent low sunlight, lighter pigmentation gradually becomes more common, not because darkness failed, but because scarcity demanded permeability. This is the quiet logic of human skin evolution. The body learns to open the door when the room grows dim. And yet, the transformation is incomplete. Even in Northern Europe, even in parts of Central Asia, the shift toward lighter skin tones took many millennia. Genetic evidence suggests that some key mutations associated with lighter pigmentation became widespread only within the last 8,000 to 10,000 years, long after humans first arrived in these regions. That means early European populations may have retained relatively darker skin for thousands of years, while still adjusting through diet and gradual genetic change. Fish rich in vitamin D along coastal areas may have buffered the crisis. Inland populations may have experienced stronger pressure to adapt. This interplay between environment, diet, and biology shaped the spectrum we see today. The silent crisis was not uniform. It varied by latitude, by lifestyle, by access to sunlight and food. But across these differences, the principle remained constant. The human body sought balance.
In this chapter of our sleep story history, the evolution of lighter skin is not portrayed as sudden revelation, but as patient negotiation. Imagine once more the northern sky at dusk. The sun hovers low, casting amber light across snow and stone. A child stands outside, face tilted upward, absorbing what little ultraviolet warmth the day provides. Within that child's skin, chemistry unfolds quietly. Cholesterol derivatives convert under faint UVB exposure. The first steps of vitamin D synthesis begin. This process, invisible yet vital, connects that child to both Africa and the Arctic, to abundance and scarcity, to shield and doorway. And here, as you rest, you may sense the emotional undertone of this adaptation. It is not conflict, it is conversation. The sun speaks through intensity or absence. The skin answers through pigment. When light was overwhelming, the answer was protection. When light was rare, the answer became openness. Protection, adjustment, survival. The Great Migration carried humanity into colder, dimmer lands. The silent crisis ensured that biology would continue listening. The story of how humans became white is therefore not a story of replacement. It is a story of recalibration, a fine-tuning of melanin levels in response to new environmental realities. Beneath every lighter tone that emerged lay the same ancient architecture built in Africa. The foundation never disappeared, it adapted. And so, as your breathing slows and the northern twilight settles softly in your imagination, let this understanding bring calm. What once seemed paradox becomes harmony. The shield did not vanish, it thinned where necessary. It allowed just enough light to sustain bone and blood. And in that delicate adjustment, humanity continued forward, step by step, beneath skies both bright and pale, guided always by the same quiet principle: survive, adapt, endure.
A tiny change, smaller than a grain of dust, hidden deep within the genetic code of a child born with skin just a little lighter than that of their parents. Not dramatically different, not startling, just a subtle softness in tone that only careful eyes might notice beneath the pale northern sun. In this quiet chapter of our history for sleep, we step into the delicate world of genetic mutation and natural selection, where the story of how humans became white unfolds not through intention, but through chance meeting necessity. In the vast landscape of human skin evolution, mutations occur constantly. Most are neutral, some are harmful. A rare few become advantageous depending on environment. This is not destiny, it is variation. Within every population, genetic differences exist naturally. And in certain regions, as the silent crisis of vitamin D scarcity continued, some of those variations began to matter more than others. Scientists studying human biology history have identified specific genes associated with pigmentation changes. One of the most well-known is SLC24A5 gene. This gene influences the production and distribution of melanin within skin cells. A particular mutation in SLC24A5, believed to have arisen thousands of years ago in a population living in what is now Europe or Western Asia, reduced melanin levels slightly. The change was microscopic, a shift in a single nucleotide in the DNA sequence, yet its effect, over generations, would become visible. Imagine that first child carrying this variation. There was no announcement, no awareness of uniqueness. The difference may have seemed insignificant, but in a region where ultraviolet B radiation was limited for much of the year, that slight reduction in melanin allowed a bit more sunlight to penetrate the skin,
A little more vitamin D could be synthesized during brief summers. A small biological advantage emerged. Natural selection does not reward immediately. It accumulates gradually. If this child survived to adulthood and had children of their own, the gene could pass forward. If those children inherited the mutation and also thrived in low sunlight environments, the frequency of the gene would slowly increase in the population. Not because lighter skin was preferred socially, not because it signaled superiority, but because in certain latitudes it offered a marginal survival benefit. This is the essence of genetic mutation in skin color adaptation. Random variation met environmental pressure. Chance encountered necessity. And slowly, across thousands of years, the distribution of pigmentation shifted. It is important to remember that SLC24A5 was not the only gene involved. Human skin colors influenced by multiple genes interacting together. But SLC24A5 became particularly prominent in European populations. In fact, genetic studies suggest that the lighter variant of SLC24A5 spread relatively rapidly in parts of Europe during the last 10,000 years, especially after the rise of agriculture. Diets shifted from vitamin D-rich hunter-gatherer patterns to grain-based farming communities, increasing reliance on sunlight for vitamin D synthesis. The environment changed again. The mutation that once offered modest benefit now became even more significant. And yet, this was never a single moment of transformation. There was no day when humanity became white. There were countless births, countless seasons, countless subtle shifts in gene frequency. Evolution works with whispers, not declarations. In this chapter of our sleep story history, let yourself feel the quiet wonder of that genetic accident, a random mutation arising in one child, carried forward not by intention, but by survival. Beneath every lighter shade that later emerged lies that small alteration in DNA, amplified by environment, reinforced by natural selection. The miracle is not that it happened. The miracle is how gently it happened, how slowly, how invisibly. As you breathe softly now, imagine the chain of inheritance stretching back through millennia, each generation passing forward tiny fragments of code, some fading away, some persisting, and among them, a small change in SLC24A5, quietly shaping the spectrum of human skin in certain regions of the world, not replacing the past, not erasing African origins, but layering new variation upon ancient foundation. In that layering, the story of how humans became white continues to unfold, written not in dramatic revolutions, but in microscopic adjustments that time patiently amplified. And so, the small mutation did not shout. It did not announce itself to the tribe. It simply existed, carried quietly within the bloodstream of a child who would never know how significant that invisible alteration might become. In this continuation of our sleep story history, we remain in the delicate realm of genetic mutation, skin color, where chance and natural selection move together like slow currents beneath the surface of time. The SLC24A5 gene did not spread because it was dramatic. It spread because it worked, subtly, consistently, quietly. Imagine generations unfolding in a northern valley. Winters stretch long and dim. Summers are brief but precious. Each year, ultraviolet B radiation appears for only a limited window. In such an environment, even a slight increase in vitamin D production can matter. A mother with adequate vitamin D is more likely to carry a pregnancy to term. A child with stronger bones is more likely to survive harsh seasons. These advantages are not absolute. They are fractional, but evolution accumulates fractions. Natural selection does not choose with intention. It filters through survival. Those carrying the lighter variant of the SLC24A5 gene were not superior. They were simply slightly better adapted to that particular latitude. Over many generations, the frequency of the mutation increased. The process was neither linear nor uniform. Migrations continued, populations mixed. Some regions saw rapid shifts in pigmentation, others changed slowly or not at all. Human biology history is never a straight line. It is a tapestry of overlapping migrations and adaptations. Genetic studies suggest that in Europe, the lighter variant of SLC24A5 became highly prevalent within the last 8,000 years, especially during the Neolithic period when farming spread across the continent. Agriculture altered diets significantly. Grain-based diets replaced diverse hunter-gatherer foods rich in fish and wild meat. With reduced dietary vitamin D intake, dependence on sunlight intensified. The environment again shaped gene frequency. The mutation that may have once provided a modest advantage now offered a more substantial one. Yet even here we must move gently. The spread of lighter pigmentation was not universal, nor was it identical across regions. In East Asia, different genetic pathways influenced lighter skin tones, illustrating convergent evolution. Separate mutations, responding to similar environmental pressures, produced comparable outcomes. This reinforces a quiet truth within human skin evolution. Similar challenges can lead to different genetic solutions. Chance operates within constraint. Natural selection filters through what chance introduces. The miracle lies not in the mutation itself, but in the way it persisted. A single nucleotide change within the SLC24A5 gene, multiplied across generations, reshaped visible pigmentation patterns across parts of the world. Yet beneath these visible differences, the deeper architecture of humanity remained unchanged. The same African origin, the same shared ancestry, the same 99.9% of DNA connecting all humans. The genetic accident did not create a new species. It modified one trait among many. As you rest now, let this thought settle softly. Evolution is not dramatic transformation. It is a cumulative whisper. It is the passing of small variations forward, generation after generation, until they become part of the landscape of a population. In this chapter of our story, the lighter skin tones that emerged in certain regions were not symbols of division. They were records of adaptation to reduced sunlight. The SLC24A5 gene did not act alone, but it reminds us how a microscopic change can ripple outward across millennia. Imagine that original child once more, playing under a pale sky. No one would have seen the future in their skin. No one would have predicted that this tiny genetic shift would become common across continents. Yet natural selection, patient and indifferent to meaning, allowed it to endure where it offered advantage. Chance introduced it, environment tested it, time preserved it. And so, as your breathing slows and the night deepens, remember that the story of how humans became white is not a story of design. It is a story of probability shaped by place, a story of genes responding to latitude, a story of adaptation layered gently upon ancient foundations. Beneath every shade of skin, the same evolutionary currents continue to flow, steady and interconnected, carrying forward the shared history of our species.
When humans stopped hunting and began to sow seeds, wheat, barley, fields shimmering gold beneath a pale sky, it seemed like progress. It seemed like stability. But every revolution carries a hidden cost. In this gentle continuation of our history for sleep, we arrive at a turning point in agricultural revolution history that few people connect to human skin evolution.
Around 10,000 years ago, in regions of the Near East and later across Europe, communities shifted from mobile hunter-gatherer lifestyles to settled farming societies. The change was gradual, uneven, and complex, yet its biological consequences were profound. For tens of thousands of years before agriculture, human diets were diverse. Coastal populations consumed fish rich in vitamin D. Inland groups hunted wild animals whose fat contained nutrients supporting bone health. Even in regions with limited ultraviolet radiation, diet partially compensated for reduced sunlight exposure. But when agriculture spread, diets narrowed. Wheat and barley became staples. Fields replaced forests. Settlements grew permanent. Grain-based diets provided calories in abundance, yet they lacked sufficient vitamin D. This subtle nutritional shift intensified the silent crisis we explored earlier. In northern latitudes, sunlight was already weak for much of the year. Now, with less dietary vitamin D from fish and wild game, the human body relied even more heavily on ultraviolet B radiation to synthesize vitamin D in the skin. The pressure increased. The shield of melanin, once protective, now had to thin more rapidly to allow adequate vitamin D production. This is where diet and skin color intersect in a surprising way. The agricultural revolution did not directly cause lighter skin, but it accelerated the selective pressure favoring genetic variants associated with reduced pigmentation. Genetic studies suggest that the lighter form of the SLC24A5 gene and related pigmentation genes spread more quickly in European farming populations than in earlier hunter-gatherer groups. The environment had changed again. Not only the sky, but the plate. Imagine a Neolithic village, mud brick homes, smoke rising from hearths, fields stretching outward in orderly rows, children playing between crops of barley. Their lives are more settled, more predictable, but their diet is less varied. Fewer fish, fewer wild animals, more grains. In such communities, vitamin D deficiency could become more common, especially during long winters. Rickets leaves subtle marks in the archaeological record: curved bones, altered growth patterns. Though not universal, these signs remind us that the transition to farming carried physiological costs. And within this new agricultural world, individuals with lighter skin, capable of producing more vitamin D under limited sunlight, may have had a stronger advantage than ever before. Natural selection does not operate with awareness. It responds to survival and reproduction. If children with certain pigmentation genes survived more reliably or reproduced more successfully, those genes increased in frequency. Over centuries, then millennia, the visible spectrum of skin tones shifted further in some regions. The agricultural revolution history thus became intertwined with human biology history. Culture reshaped diet. Diet reshaped selective pressures. Selective pressures reshaped gene frequencies. This is not a story of intention. It is a chain reaction of adaptation. And yet, as we rest quietly in this reflection, let us remember that this acceleration did not erase diversity. Not all agricultural societies experienced identical pressures. Coastal farming communities still had access to fish. Southern regions with stronger sunlight experienced less intense selection for lighter pigmentation. Evolution remains local, nuanced, and responsive. Still, around 10,000 years ago, something changed in the tempo of skin evolution in certain northern farming populations. The combination of reduced dietary vitamin D and limited sunlight created a sharper need for lighter skin. What began as a whisper of mutation in earlier generations now found stronger environmental reinforcement. As you breathe slowly now,
Imagine those golden fields under a cool sky. Hear the quiet rustle of grain. Beneath that apparent calm, biology continued its patient adjustments. The agricultural accelerator did not invent lighter skin. It intensified the conditions under which lighter pigmentation could flourish. And in that intensification, the story of how humans became white entered a new phase, not through conquest, not through design, but through the intimate connection between diet, sunlight, and survival.
And so the fields grew wider, and the villages grew denser, and the rhythm of human life changed in ways no one at the time could measure. The agricultural revolution history often tells a story of innovation, of settled homes and stored grain, of population growth and new forms of community. But beneath this cultural transformation, another story unfolded quietly within the Bai. A story where diet and skin color began to intersect more tightly than ever before. When hunter-gatherers moved with the seasons, their diets shifted with the landscape. Coastal groups consumed oily fish rich in vitamin D. Inland hunters relied on wild animals whose organs and fat contained vital nutrients. These foods provided a buffer against limited sunlight, especially in higher latitudes. But farming narrowed that nutritional diversity. Wheat and barley provided reliable calories, yet they contributed little vitamin D. In agricultural villages far from the coast, the reliance on sunlight became more absolute. Imagine a farming community in Neolithic Europe 8,000 years ago. The harvest has been stored, the days shorten, winter settles in. Smoke lingers low over the huts. For months, ultraviolet B radiation is minimal. The grain stores sustain hunger, but they cannot sustain vitamin D levels. Children grow through winters of scarcity not only in warmth, but in ultraviolet light. Archaeological evidence from certain early farming populations reveals skeletal signs consistent with rickets, subtle curvature in long bones, changes in bone density. These traces remind us that stability came with biological trade-offs. The human biology history of this era shows that cultural innovation can reshape evolutionary pressure. The agricultural accelerator did not invent lighter skin, but it intensified the selective environment in which lighter pigmentation became more advantageous in specific regions. Genetic data suggests that alleles associated with lighter skin, including variants of the SLC24A5 gene, rose in frequency during and after the spread of farming communities. This does not imply a sudden transformation. It reflects gradual change reinforced by new dietary realities. When vitamin D intake from food decreased, the body relied even more heavily on ultraviolet B exposure. In northern latitudes where sunlight was already weak for much of the year, even small increases in vitamin D synthesis mattered. Individuals with slightly reduced melanin could produce more vitamin D during limited summer months. That incremental advantage could translate into stronger skeletal development and improved reproductive success. Over centuries, these differences accumulated. The paradox deepens here. Farming allowed populations to grow. It allowed settlements to flourish. Yet it also sharpened the biological need for adaptation in low sunlight environments. Culture accelerated evolution by changing nutritional context. The connection between agricultural revolution history and human skin evolution is subtle but powerful. It reminds us that evolution is not driven by climate alone. It responds to lifestyle, to food sources, to patterns of settlement. As you rest now, imagine those golden fields once more, but this time beneath a sky dimmed by approaching winter. Hear the wind pass through dry stalks. Feel the quiet weight of stored grain inside wooden containers. Beneath this stillness, invisible processes continue within human skin. The body seeks equilibrium. It seeks sufficient vitamin D to build bone and support immune defense. The genetic accident of lighter pigmentation, once a whisper, now resonates more clearly in this agricultural world. And yet, even with this acceleration, diversity remained. Southern Europe, bathed in stronger sunlight, did not experience the same intensity of selective pressure as northern regions. Coastal communities retained access to fish. Evolution remained uneven, local, nuanced. There was no universal transformation. There was only a mosaic of responses shaped by geography and diet. The agricultural accelerator teaches us that human evolution is deeply intertwined with human culture. When we changed the land changed us in return. When we changed our food, our biology adjusted. The story of how humans became white in certain regions cannot be told without this chapter of diet and adaptation. And as the night grows deeper and your breathing steadies, let this final thought settle gently. The fields of wheat and barley were symbols of security, but they also reshaped the pressures acting on our ancestors' bodies. The shift toward lighter skin in some populations was not aesthetic. It was a response to a world where sunlight was scarce and diet had narrowed. Beneath the golden harvest, evolution continued its patient work, refining pigment one generation at a time, guided not by intention, but by survival.
In the west, skin gradually lightened beneath pale northern skies. But far to the east, across vast plains and mountain ranges, a similar story was unfolding, written in a different genetic language. In this gentle continuation of our history for sleep, we enter one of the most fascinating chapters of human skin evolution, convergent evolution, where nature solves the same problem more than once, but through different pathways. The challenge was shared: reduced ultraviolet radiation in higher latitudes, the need for sufficient vitamin D production, the balance between melanin protection and sunlight absorption. Yet the solutions were not identical. In Europe, as we have explored, variants of the SLC24A5 gene and related pigmentation genes rose in frequency over thousands of years. These genetic changes contributed to reduced melanin levels in certain populations. But in East Asia, the evolutionary journey followed a different route. The term convergent evolution describes a phenomenon in biology where unrelated or distinct populations develop similar traits independently in response to comparable environmental pressures. It is not imitation, it is parallel adaptation. Just as wings evolved separately in birds and bats, lighter skin tones evolved in parts of Europe and East Asia through distinct genetic mechanisms. Studies of Asian skin evolution reveal that some of the major European pigmentation genes, including SLC24A5, are less prevalent in East Asian populations. Instead, other genes, such as variants in OCA2 and additional pigmentation-related loci, played more prominent roles. The outcome appears visually similar: lighter skin compared to equatorial ancestors, but the underlying genetic architecture differs. Imagine two distant landscapes. In one, a farming community in Neolithic Europe adjusting to long winters and grain-based diets. In another, ancient populations migrating through Central Asia into East Asia, encountering cold climates, seasonal sunlight, and varied ecological conditions. Both regions experienced reduced ultraviolet radiation compared to equatorial Africa. Both required sufficient vitamin D synthesis. Both carried the same ancient African genetic foundation.
Yet when natural selection acted upon available genetic variation, it acted upon what was present locally. Mutations arise randomly. The specific mutations available in one population may differ from those in another. When similar environmental pressures apply, different genetic variations can be favored, leading to similar phenotypic outcomes. This is the quiet elegance of convergent evolution. Nature does not follow a single script, it improvises within constraints. And so, in parts of East Asia, skin pigmentation gradually lightened over millennia, not because European genes spread universally, but because local genetic variations were selected in response to similar sunlight conditions. The destination, lighter skin in higher latitudes, was shared. The path was distinct. This realization deepens our understanding of human biology history. It reveals that visible similarity does not always imply identical ancestry at the genetic level. It also reinforces a profound unity. All these populations began with darker skin in Africa. All carried the same foundational genome. Variation emerged after migration, shaped by local environments and genetic possibilities. As you rest now, imagine the Eurasian continent stretching wide beneath the night sky. From Atlantic shores to Pacific coasts, different communities faced similar climatic challenges. The sun, lower in the sky, delivered weaker ultraviolet rays. Across this vast expanse, independent adjustments occurred. Genes shifted frequency, melanin levels recalibrated, not in synchrony, but in parallel. Different paths, same destination. In this chapter of our sleep story history, we are reminded that evolution is creative. It does not demand uniformity. It produces diversity through multiple routes. The story of how humans became white in Europe and lighter-skinned in East Asia is not a single linear narrative. It is a tapestry woven from separate threads responding to shared environmental rhythms. Beneath these threads lies a common origin, steady and unbroken.
And so, across the vast breadth of Eurasia, beneath skies that dimmed with latitude, humanity responded not as a single note, but as a quiet harmony. In this continuation of our history for sleep, we linger in the gentle realization that Asian skin evolution and European skin evolution are not copies of one another, but parallel verses in the same long song of adaptation. The principle of convergent evolution reminds us that nature does not favor uniformity, it favors functionality. When faced with reduced ultraviolet radiation, the human body sought balance, but balance can be achieved in more than one way. In East Asia, genetic studies show that pigmentation shifts were influenced by different combinations of genes than those dominant in Europe. Variants affecting melanin production and distribution changed over time, shaped by local climate, diet, and migration patterns. The visual outcome, lighter skin relative to equatorial ancestors, appears similar at a distance, yet the molecular pathways differ. This distinction is subtle but profound. It tells us that similarity does not require sameness. Imagine early populations moving eastward across Central Asia. Winters grew colder, sunlight weakened. The agricultural revolution would later reshape parts of East Asia as well, altering diet and settlement patterns. Rice fields replaced forests, communities stabilized. As in Europe, reduced dietary vitamin D combined with limited sunlight may have intensified selective pressure for pigmentation changes, but the available genetic variations were different. Nature worked with what was present. This is the quiet elegance of human biology history. The same environmental challenge, less sunlight, encountered different genetic landscapes. Natural selection favored local solutions.
Over millennia, allele frequencies shifted. Skin tones lightened in some regions of East Asia, not because European genes spread universally, but because independent mutations provided similar functional advantages. The destination was shared, the journey was unique. As you rest now, allow yourself to sense the emotional undertone of this convergence. Across continents, separated by mountains and deserts, different human communities responded to the same whisper of the sun. There is something deeply connective in that image. The sun lowers, ultraviolet rays weaken, bones still require strength, children still need to grow, and in response, genes shift quietly in multiple places at once, guided by the same biological necessity. The story of how humans became white in parts of Europe and lighter-skinned in East Asia is therefore not a narrative of divergence, but of unity expressed through diversity. Beneath every visible variation lies a shared ancestry rooted in Africa. Beneath every lighter tone lies the same ancient melanin system, recalibrated but not replaced. Convergent evolution teaches us that humanity adapts creatively. When faced with similar pressures, we do not fracture into separate stories, we compose variations on a theme. In this chapter of our sleep story history, the theme is sunlight and survival. The variations are genetic. The melody remains human. Genetic mutations, skin color changes did not follow a single blueprint, they followed environmental logic, and that logic was global. As agricultural societies expanded in different regions, as diets shifted and climates challenged bone health, selective pressures intensified in parallel. Yet even within these parallels, diversity persisted. Southern China experienced different sunlight patterns than northern Japan. Mediterranean climates differed from Scandinavian winters. Evolution remained local, nuanced, responsive. There was no universal transformation sweeping the continent. There were only countless small adjustments accumulating across landscapes. As the night deepens and your breathing grows steady, imagine the map of Eurasia softly illuminated. Threads of adaptation extend from west to east, each thread distinct, yet woven into a single tapestry. The phrase convergent evolution is scientific, but its emotional resonance is gentle. It reminds us that humanity, wherever it traveled, carried the same fundamental blueprint. When light diminished, solutions emerged. When diets narrowed, genes responded. Different paths, same destination. Not because of hierarchy, not because of design, but because the biological need for vitamin D, for bone strength, for survival under pale skies was universal. And so the story continues, not as a division between continents, but as a testament to shared resilience across them. Not only the skin. Look into eyes the color of deep water. Notice hair the shade of dry wheat or copper flame catching the last light of dusk. In this quiet continuation of our history for sleep, we move beyond pigmentation of the skin and into what some researchers gently call the northern package, a constellation of traits that became more common in certain higher latitude populations. Lighter eyes, blonde hair, red hair. These features are not universal, nor are they exclusive to one region, but their increased frequency in parts of Northern Europe invites a soft question within human biology history. Why did such variation appear, and why did it persist? As with skin color, the answer begins in Africa. Early humans carried dark hair and dark eyes as the ancestral condition. Melanin was abundant not only in skin, but in hair and the iris of the eye. Dark pigmentation provided protection against ultraviolet radiation, shielding the scalp and guarding delicate ocular tissues. When humans migrated north and ultraviolet radiation decreased, the selective pressure to maintain high melanin levels weakened. For skin, reduced melanin allowed greater vitamin D synthesis. For hair and eyes, the story becomes more nuanced. Blue eyes evolution is often traced to a mutation affecting the OCA2 and HERC2 gene region, influencing melanin production in the iris. Genetic evidence suggests that the mutation responsible for blue eyes likely arose in a single individual thousands of years ago, possibly in southeastern Europe. From that point, it spread gradually. The change did not create pigment, it reduced it. Brown eyes contain more melanin in the iris. Blue eyes contain less. The blue appearance is not from blue pigment, but from light scattering in a melanin-reduced iris. The science is precise, yet the effect is poetic. In low sunlight regions, reduced eye pigmentation did not carry the same protective necessity as in equatorial zones. The selective pressure against lighter irises diminished. Some researchers propose that sexual selection may have played a role. When a rare trait appears in a population, it can attract attention simply because it is uncommon. If individuals with lighter eyes or hair were perceived as distinctive, and if that distinctiveness influenced mate choice even subtly, the trait could increase in frequency. This does not imply conscious preference as we understand it today. It reflects complex social and biological dynamics unfolding over generations. Red hair history offers another thread. Red hair is often associated with variations in the MC1 gene, which affects melanin type. Eumelanin produces darker pigments. Pheomelanin produces reddish tones. In regions of low ultraviolet radiation, higher levels of pheomelanin may not have posed significant survival disadvantages. Thus, red hair, though relatively rare globally, reached higher frequencies in certain northern populations. It remains uncommon even there, reminding us that evolution does not distribute traits evenly. Imagine a northern landscape at twilight, snow reflecting soft light, a child with pale hair illuminated against a gray sky, another with hair like embers, another with eyes reflecting the pale blue of winter. These variations do not replace the ancestral human blueprint. They layer upon it. They add detail to the portrait. In this chapter of our sleep story history, we are not describing superiority or hierarchy. We are describing diversity shaped by environment and perhaps by the quiet currents of attraction and social dynamics. The northern package did not arise from a single cause. It likely reflects a combination of relaxed ultraviolet pressure, genetic drift in smaller populations, and potential sexual selection. Evolution is rarely singular in motive, it is cumulative in effect. As you breathe slowly now, allow the imagery of color to settle softly in your mind. Blue like distant water, gold like harvested grain, red like autumn leaves. These hues are not divisions, they are variations in melanin expression, sculpted by latitude and time. Beneath them remains the same human genome, largely shared across continents. The northern package is a chapter of aesthetic diversity within the broader narrative of adaptation. It reminds us that when environmental pressures shift, the canvas of humanity can display new shades, new tones, without ever changing its underlying foundation.
So beneath the quiet sky of the north, the human face slowly became a canvas of softer tones. In this continuation of our history for sleep, we drift deeper into the poetry behind blue eyes evolution and red hair history, not as symbols of separation, but as brushstrokes in a broader portrait of adaptation.
When ultraviolet radiation weakens across generations, the strict necessity for heavy pigmentation in hair and eyes diminishes. In equatorial regions, darker irises protect against glare and potential damage from intense sunlight. In northern latitudes, where the sun sits lower and light is often diffused by clouds or snow, that protective pressure relaxes. Relaxed selection is an important concept in human biology history. It does not demand change, it simply allows variation to persist. In smaller populations, especially during periods of migration and settlement, genetic drift also plays a role. Drift refers to random fluctuations in gene frequency that occur not because a trait is advantageous, but because chance determines which individuals reproduce. Imagine a small northern community isolated by distance or climate. Within that community, a rare trait, lighter eyes perhaps, or hair with a golden hue, may appear. If the group remains relatively small, that trait can become more common simply through random inheritance patterns over generations. There is no grand design in this process. There is only probability moving quietly through bloodlines. And yet, some scientists suggest that sexual selection may have amplified these traits. Sexual selection differs from natural selection in subtle ways. While natural selection focuses on survival advantages, sexual selection centers on mate choice. Traits that stand out may become desirable, even if they offer no direct survival benefit. In a northern population where lighter pigmentation had already begun to spread through reduced melanin in skin, variations in hair and eye color may have become more noticeable. Distinctiveness can attract attention. Attention can influence pairing. Pairing shapes gene frequency. Over centuries, such dynamics may have enhanced the visibility of blue eyes or red hair in certain regions. Red hair history in particular carries a gentle mystery. Variants of the MC1R gene are associated with red hair and fair skin. These variants alter melanin balance, increasing pheomelanin relative to eumelanin. In regions of low ultraviolet radiation, the reduced protective capacity of pheomelanin may not have posed significant disadvantages, thus red hair could persist. It remained relatively rare even in Northern Europe, yet its very rarity may have reinforced its distinctiveness. The interplay between relaxed ultraviolet pressure, genetic drift, and possible sexual selection created what some call the northern package, a cluster of traits more frequently observed in specific high-latitude populations. But we must tread carefully. These traits are not exclusive. Blue eyes are found beyond Europe. Dark hair exists in northern regions. Human variation is fluid, not fixed. As you breathe slowly now, imagine a quiet northern village at dusk. Snow glows faintly beneath a fading sky. Faces gather around firelight. One pair of eyes reflects the pale blue of winter ice. Another gleams deep brown, ancient and steady. A child's hair catches flame-colored light. Each variation tells a story, but none rewrite the foundation. Beneath the iris, beneath the strands of hair, lies the same human architecture shaped first under African suns. The northern package is not a departure from humanity's origin, it is an elaboration, a softening of tones in response to latitude, a mosaic of traits emerging from complex interplay rather than single cause. Blue eyes evolution and red hair history illustrate that adaptation can extend beyond strict survival needs into realms of subtle social dynamics. Yet even here, the forces remain grounded in environment and probability. As the night deepens, let this understanding settle gently. The diversity of eyes and hair in certain northern populations is not a statement of difference in worth. It is a testament to flexibility. When sunlight shifts, pigmentation adjusts. When populations grow small, drift shapes outcomes. When uniqueness draws attention, social patterns influence inheritance. All of it woven together over millennia. And so the story of how humans became white in parts of the world is incomplete without this chapter of eyes and hair. Not because these traits define identity, but because they remind us that evolution paints with many shades. The same species, the same ancestry, the same fundamental DNA, expressing itself through variation in color and light.
And then, ships crossed oceans, steam engines roared, airplanes cut through clouds. In the briefest flicker of global history, humanity mixed again on a scale never before seen. In this quiet continuation of our history for sleep, we arrive at a profound contrast between modern human migration and ancient biological adaptation. For tens of thousands of years, skin color evolved slowly, guided by latitude, sunlight, diet, and selective pressure. Evolution moved at the pace of generations. But in just a few centuries, an instant compared to evolutionary time, humans reshaped geography with extraordinary speed. Pale-skinned Europeans settled under the intense sun of Australia and the Americas. Darker-skinned populations migrated to northern Europe and Canada. Cities became mosaics of ancestry. The biological map and the geographic map no longer aligned neatly. For most of our evolutionary story, adaptation and location were synchronized. Darker skin near the equator, lighter skin in higher latitudes. The balance between melanin and ultraviolet radiation was local and gradual. But modern human migration disrupted that slow calibration. A person with light pigmentation can now live under equatorial sun. A person with deeply pigmented skin can grow up in Scandinavia. The environment changes instantly, biology does not. Here we encounter the gentle tension between adaptation and acceleration. Human skin evolution operates across thousands of years. Air travel operates across hours. When a lightly pigmented population settles in regions with intense ultraviolet radiation, the protective capacity of reduced melanin may be insufficient. Higher risks of sunburn and skin damage can emerge. The sun, once filtered by clouds and low angles, now stands directly overhead. Sunscreen becomes a modern shield, a cultural response to a biological mismatch. On the other hand, when individuals with higher melanin levels live in regions with limited ultraviolet radiation, vitamin D synthesis may become less efficient. In northern cities with long winters and indoor lifestyles, the challenge intensifies. Vitamin D supplements enter the story, a technological bridge between ancestral adaptation and modern geography. This is not a flaw in evolution, it is a reflection of speed. Modern global history moves faster than genetic adaptation. Our genes were shaped by slow pressures. Our airplanes ignore latitude. And yet, beneath this contrast lies a remarkable resilience. The human body remains flexible within limits. Public health awareness, nutrition science, and medicine compensate where natural selection once required millennia. We now understand the relationship between ultraviolet radiation, melanin, and vitamin D in ways our ancestors never could.
We recognize that sunscreen can reduce ultraviolet damage in high sun environments. We know that dietary supplementation can support bone health in low sun climates. The modern world has introduced a new layer to human biology history: cultural adaptation acting faster than genetic change. As you rest now, imagine the arc of migration across centuries. Sailing ships leaving European ports, enslaved Africans forced across oceans, Asian laborers crossing continents, families boarding airplanes in the 20th century. The mixing of populations accelerates, genetic variation interweaves, the once localized patterns of pigmentation blur. In this chapter of our sleep story history, the question is no longer simply how humans became white in certain regions. It is how adaptation meets mobility. The slow rhythm of evolution now shares space with the rapid pulse of globalization. And in that meeting, new balances are found, not through genetic mutation alone, but through awareness and choice.
And so the world grows smaller, while our evolutionary past remains vast and patient. In this continuation of our history for sleep, we rest inside the gentle contrast between slow biology and rapid movement, between the long arc of adaptation and the sudden crossings of modern human migration. For thousands of years, skin color aligned with geography. Latitude shaped melanin levels. Sunlight sculpted pigment. But now, within a single lifetime, a child may be born in Lagos, study in London, work in Toronto, and raise a family in Sydney. The ancient logic of adaptation has not disappeared, yet it no longer dictates location. This creates a quiet mismatch, not as a crisis, but as a reminder of how swiftly global history now unfolds. A person with light pigmentation living under equatorial sun may need consistent protection against ultraviolet radiation. Sunscreen, clothing, shade structures, and medical awareness become extensions of what melanin once provided. In regions like Australia, where European ancestry met intense sunlight, public health campaigns emerged to address increased skin cancer risk. The solution is cultural, technological, immediate. Meanwhile, a person with deeply pigmented skin living in Northern Europe may face challenges synthesizing adequate vitamin D during long winters. Indoor lifestyles amplify this effect. Supplements, fortified foods, and dietary adjustments act as modern bridges between ancestral biology and contemporary geography. In this way, adaptation continues, not through mutation alone, but through knowledge. The story of how humans became white in certain regions cannot be isolated from this modern chapter. The evolutionary process that once unfolded over millennia now intersects with globalization. Airplanes, shipping routes, digital communication, and economic networks weave populations together at unprecedented speed. The visible mosaic of skin tones within cities reflects both ancient migrations and modern mobility. Yet beneath this diversity, the shared origin remains unchanged. All humans carry ancestry that traces back to Africa. All humans share the same basic genetic blueprint. The variations in melanin, eye color, or hair texture are small adjustments layered upon that foundation. Modern human migration reveals something profound. Evolution prepared us for local environments, but culture prepared us for planetary coexistence. We are no longer bound to the latitude of our ancestors. We create artificial light in winter. We generate shade in summer. We supplement nutrients when needed. We design clothing and architecture that buffer climate. This does not negate evolution. It demonstrates another layer of adaptation,
the adaptive capacity of culture itself. As you rest now, imagine the lights of a modern city seen from above, streets glowing like constellations. Within each building, faces of many shades. A child with fair skin playing under tropical sun, a child with dark skin gazing at snowfall for the first time. Their genomes carry ancient instructions shaped by different latitudes, yet their lives unfold side by side. The contrast between slow evolution and fast globalization becomes almost tender. Biology whispers across centuries. Technology shouts across decades. And in that space between whisper and shout, humanity finds balance. Vitamin D supplements and sunscreen may seem ordinary, but they symbolize a profound transition. For most of our species' history, adaptation required genetic change. Today, knowledge can achieve in months what once required thousands of years. We can mitigate ultraviolet damage. We can prevent deficiency. We can understand the science of melanin without attaching meaning beyond biology. In this final movement of our chapter, allow the emotional tone to soften. The story of skin color is not a story of division. It is a story of adaptation, responding to sunlight, diet, and migration. Modern global history has braided those threads together once more. People of different ancestries now share neighborhoods, schools, languages, and futures. The old geographic boundaries that once shaped pigment no longer confine human movement. And so, as your breathing deepens and the night wraps gently around you, remember this: evolution moves slowly, but humanity moves together. The colors of skin are chapters in a shared narrative, shaped by ancient light and modern journeys. In the quiet, after our long journey through evolution, migration, and adaptation, we arrive at a gentler question: what does skin color truly mean? And here, as your breathing slows and the rhythm of this history for sleep settles into something softer, we begin with a simple truth. Skin color is not race, it is latitude. It is sunlight measured across generations. It is the memory of climate written in melanin. For centuries, societies layered stories upon pigment, attaching meaning where biology had only offered adaptation. Yet when we look carefully through the lens of human biology history, we see something far less dramatic and far more beautiful. Skin tone is a climate response. It is a balance between ultraviolet radiation and protection. It is a negotiation between vitamin D synthesis and folate preservation. Nothing more, nothing less. In the philosophy of skin color, there is a profound quietness. The variations that once seemed to divide humanity are, scientifically speaking, small adjustments in the production of melanin. The genes that influence pigmentation represent a tiny fraction of our shared genome. Across all continents, humans share over 99.9% of their DNA. The visible differences that catch the eye are surface details, shaped by sunlight and time. We are, in the most literal sense, children of the sun. Near the equator, intense ultraviolet radiation favored darker pigmentation to shield delicate biological processes. In higher latitudes, softer sunlight favored lighter skin to allow sufficient vitamin D production. Climate adaptation guided the process. Natural selection refined it. But beneath those adjustments, the core of human unity remained unchanged. When we speak of human unity in this sleep story history, we are not invoking poetry alone. We are speaking from genetics, from anthropology, from the out-of-Africa theory that reminds us that every living person traces ancestry back to the same continent. Every shade of skin today emerges from that shared origin. The spectrum of pigmentation is a gradient, not a boundary. It fades gradually across geography, like twilight dissolving into night. Yet cultural narratives often harden these gradients into categories. History shows how societies sometimes misinterpreted adaptation as hierarchy, but science whispers a correction. The same evolutionary forces that shaped pigmentation also shaped lactose tolerance, body proportions, and countless other traits. None of them define worth. They define environment. They define survival under particular conditions. And in our modern world of global migration, these adaptations overlap and intermingle once more. The philosophy of skin color, then, becomes an invitation to reframe perception. Instead of seeing division, we see adaptation. Instead of seeing separation, we see response to light. When sunlight shifts, melanin shifts. When diet changes, biology adjusts. The human story is flexible, not fixed. As you lie still, imagine sunlight touching the earth. At the equator, it strikes directly. Toward the poles, it slants gently. The planet tilts, seasons turn, and across millennia, human skin subtly responds. This is not a story of superiority. It is not a story of destiny. It is a story of balance. Melanin as shield, melanin as doorway, climate as sculptor, evolution as patient artisan. And perhaps the deepest meaning lies here. What we often treat as defining difference is, biologically, an echo of geography. Skin color is weather remembered by the body. It is sunlight translated into pigment. It is adaptation, not identity.
And so, as we move gently toward the closing reflections of this history for sleep, the question softens even further. If skin color is climate adaptation, if it is sunlight remembered by the body, then what remains when we set aside centuries of misunderstanding? What remains is something astonishingly simple: human unity. Beneath every shade, beneath every gradient of melanin shaped by latitude, lies the same biological architecture, the same fragile bones strengthened by vitamin D, the same circulating blood carrying oxygen, the same neural impulses lighting thought. The philosophy of skin color invites us not to ignore difference, but to understand it without distortion. When we remove hierarchy and myth, what we see is a species exquisitely responsive to its environment. Climate adaptation does not fragment humanity. It demonstrates its resilience. Across deserts, tundra, rainforests, and coastlines, the human body adjusted quietly to ultraviolet radiation, to diet, to seasonal cycles. Melanin rose or receded. Genes like SLC24A5 or variants affecting pigmentation shifted in frequency. Yet through all of this, the genetic distance between populations remained remarkably small. Anthropologists consistently remind us that the greatest genetic diversity exists within Africa itself, the cradle of humanity. The variations outside it are branches, not separate trees. In the long sweep of global history, migrations layered diversity upon diversity. Modern human migration accelerated that mixing. Today, in a single city, one may encounter dozens of ancestral lineages intertwined. The visible spectrum of skin tones is not a map of separation, but a testament to movement. In this sleep story history, the final understanding emerges gently. The story of how humans became white in certain regions is not a story of transformation from one kind of human into another. It is a story of adjustment along a continuum. Lighter pigmentation evolved where ultraviolet radiation was scarce.
Darker pigmentation persisted where sunlight was abundant. When conditions shifted, so did selective pressures. Climate wrote its signature. Evolution signed quietly beneath it. But identity, belonging, dignity, these are cultural creations layered on top of biological adaptation. Science neither assigns value nor ranks adaptation. It observes, it measures, it explains. And what it explains consistently is interconnection. The philosophy of skin color, therefore, becomes almost meditative. Imagine the Earth turning slowly in space. Sunlight washes over continents, clouds drift, ice ages advance and retreat. Human groups move in response, carrying tools, stories, and genes. Over thousands of years, melanin adjusts like a dial responding to brightness. Nothing mystical, nothing hierarchical, just adaptation. The deep meaning, then, is restorative. We are not divided by color, we are shaped by light. We are not separated by pigment, we are connected by ancestry. Every person alive carries within them the memory of African sunlight, whether their skin is pale as northern winter or dark as equatorial soil. The human unity beneath variation is not sentimental language, it is evolutionary fact. And perhaps this knowledge itself offers a kind of calm. In a world that often amplifies difference, biology whispers continuity. In a global history that sometimes emphasizes division, anthropology reveals shared origin. As you allow your thoughts to grow quieter now, consider the journey we have traced. From equatorial sun to northern winters, from melanin as shield to melanin as doorway, from migration on foot to migration by air. Through it all, adaptation never erased our common foundation. Skin color tells a story of climate. It tells a story of survival, but it does not tell a story of separation. And as night settles fully around you, let that understanding rest gently in your mind. The same sun that once shaped our ancestors still rises. The same earth still turns. The spectrum of human skin remains a living archive of adaptation, a soft reminder that we are variations within a single human family, children of the same light, moving together across the same planet. Now let this story settle. Like the sun slowly lowering itself beyond the horizon. The light softens, the edges blur, and no matter the shade of your skin, every tone rests the same in darkness. In this final movement of our sleep meditation history, we release the questions, the science, the migrations, and we return to something simple. The sun, the skin, protection, rest. For thousands of years, sunlight shaped melanin. For thousands more, adaptation guided survival. But tonight, under the quiet sky, there is no need to adapt. There is no need to measure ultraviolet radiation or trace ancestral roots across continents. The body that once responded to climate now responds to stillness. Your breathing slows, your shoulders soften. The ancient relationship between sunlight and skin fades gently into shadow. This guided sleep story is not about division. It is not about difference. It is about rhythm. The rhythm of the earth turning. The rhythm of day becoming night. The rhythm of evolution unfolding patiently across millennia. And now, the rhythm of your own breath. Inhale slowly, exhale softly. The same sun that once sculpted pigmentation now disappears beyond the edge of the world. Darkness equalizes everything. In darkness, melanin does not matter. Latitude does not matter. What remains is the steady pulse of being human. Earlier, We traced the arc of how humans became white in certain regions through climate adaptation and genetic mutation. We followed the out of Africa journey. We observed vitamin D evolution and the agricultural revolution history that accelerated change. We reflected on convergent evolution across continents. But as night deepens, those details dissolve into something quieter. The deep meaning lingers. We are children of the same sun, and when the sun sets, we are simply human. Imagine the planet viewed from space, a thin blue sphere turning slowly, one half bathed in light, the other resting in shadow. Every 24 hours, each place receives both brightness and darkness. No region is forever sunlit. No region is forever dim. The Earth rotates. The balance continues. The story of skin color is a story of light, but it is also a story of rest. Even under equatorial brilliance, night arrives. Even in northern summers, twilight eventually fades. The body understands this rhythm instinctively. Protection during the day, recovery at night. Sunlight awakens melanin. Darkness restores calm. Sun, skin, protection, rest. Let those words move gently through your mind. Sun, skin, protection, rest. The climate that shaped your ancestors no longer demands vigilance in this moment. Your nervous system can soften. The long arc of global history does not require your attention now. Evolution moves slowly, and tonight you do not need to move at all. You are supported by gravity, by the quiet air around you, by the steady rhythm of your heart. In this sleep meditation history, we allow knowledge to transform into tranquility. Science becomes softness. Anthropology becomes awareness. Biology becomes breath. Whatever shade your skin carries, it carries the memory of adaptation, the wisdom of survival. And now, it carries you gently into sleep. The sun has done its work for today. It shaped continents and climates long before us. It sculpted pigmentation over thousands of generations. But it also yields to night without resistance. The horizon darkens, the sky cools. Shadows stretch and blend. All colors merge into the same gentle absence of light. Let your thoughts dim the same way. Let curiosity fade. Let analysis drift away. There is nothing left to understand. There is only rest. The planet turns, the stars appear. Your breathing slows once more. Sun, skin, protection, rest. And now, as this guided sleep story comes to its quiet close, allow yourself to drift fully. The same earth that shaped humanity holds you now. The same darkness that equalizes every shade wraps around you softly. Good night.